to recording now. Okay, I hope it works. So good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to see you, even though I'm not seeing your face, but I know you are there. So I just want to thank you for spending the time with us, giving us the opportunities, to introduce a newly formed IQP and HUA center. That is the Taiwan HUA and IQP project centers. So my name is Wenhua Du, and along with Professor Jennifer Rudo, we are the co-directors of the Taiwan IQP project center, as well as the HUA center. So we should begin with the next slide. All right, next one. Thank you. So you might wonder, where is Taiwan? Let me tell you, Taiwan is a very, very small island. So if you take a look at the map, it is actually only 100 miles, just next to mainland China, and the population is about like 23 million people. Taiwan is about the size of 1.3 Massachusetts. So you could imagine the density of the population. So this is Taiwan is in a very subtropical island. So during the summer, it could be very humid and hot. And one of the things I could notice by myself is my hair getting getting a lot of crazy hair. But this is the humid weather in Taiwan. But luckily, we do have the the indoor. Most of the indoor have the air conditioning, so including the public transportation. So you don't need to worry about that. So next slide, please. So the center, we are going to set up our center in Taipei. So Taipei is the northern part of China. It is the political and economic and cultural center of Taiwan. And then Taipei, as you could see, is a very interesting city, even though we can only give you a few pictures to demonstrate. As you could see, it's a very westernized city. However, it also infused a lot of traditional, element into the city. The next slide, please. So, for the IQP project center, we are going to recruit our first small co-host, targeting, if everything goes smoothly, we'll be sending our student in E-Turn 2021. Our target is to try to recruit 12 students to take a student to Taiwan to conduct a feasibility study to find out what are the best practice of setting up an IQP and HUA center in Taiwan. Our goal is in D-Turn 2022, we'll be running in a full capacity. And right now we have been, reaching out to recruiting the potential project sponsor. We have been in touch with the University of the Advancement Office, trying to outreach our alumni in Taiwan. We've been also, contacting into the TACO Boston office. For those who have not heard of the TACO office, that is Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Boston. So the office is pretty much equivalent to embassies, the status. However, because the U.S. and Taiwan does not have a diplomatic relationship, we do have the office there in Boston to help us to reach out for the potential sponsors. And in a sense, you are also giving our student the list of the sponsor. When our first group of the student is going to send to Taiwan in E-Turn to help us to identify, and talk to those sponsors as well. So next slide, please. So some of you might be interesting. So we are interested in go to Taiwan. So what about language? Do I need to have the Chinese in order to get around in Taipei and Taiwan? So let me tell you this, it would be wonderful if you have the language ability, that is certainly a plus, but don't worry about that if you don't have the language ability. So a little bit of the introduction of the language used in Taiwan. Mandarin Chinese is the official language. We are also using the traditional Chinese characters, but all of the street sign, I have to say, including like the bus stop, subway stop, and a lot of the, the commercial actually, combined with English as well. So don't worry about getting lost. And as a matter of fact, people in Taiwan and in Taipei, particularly in Taipei, they speak some level of English, and they are very, very friendly typically. And then they would also like to help you, and beyond, to help you to get. If you get lost, they will help you. So no worry about the language part. Next slide, please. And so what about our host institution? So luckily, we actually find out a partner in Taiwan. So it is Soochow University. It is located in a suburban city outside of Taipei. It's not quite far away, but it's still located in Taipei City. It is only 1 mile away from the National Palace Museum. So for some of you, I guess you probably heard about the Forbidden City, right? It's a a splendor, it's a palace in Beijing. However, for a lot of the treasures, including the artifact, they were actually located in Taiwan in this particular museum. So it is a very, very famous museum, and it is only 1 mile away from our host institution, Soochow University. So another thing I would like to mention about is we have also partnered, with Soochow University to launch a buddy pair up program. With that said, our students, once we get to Taiwan and before that, they will help us to pair a buddy with you to help you to get around, when you are in Taipei. And then, so this is a program that we'll be offering. Next slide, please. So in terms of the housing, Soochow University is going to, offer us a 2-bedroom self-catered apartment. In the next slide, you'll be able to see they are all furnished. So basically 2 students will be share a 2-bedroom apartment, which include a living room, a small cooking area, kitchen. As you can see, they also have the refrigerator, microwave, and they have their own bathroom, closet, and the desk. Everything is provided, and it is conveniently located on campus. So it's pretty safe. All right, next slide, please. So speaking of the highlight of Taiwan, I believe Professor Rudo will, talk a lot about that later, in her slide. But one of the things that if you are asking people, who have been to Taiwan, what is the most impression, that you have, they might tell you a lot of the things, but I can guarantee you food is definitely one of the things they will be, talk about. So why it is so famous? Well, first of all, it's delicious. Secondly, it's cheap, and then comparing to a lot of the the food in the U.S. And one of the things is also to do with the history of Taiwan. And I believe later on, Professor Rudo will mention that about that too. So this is something to do with the Civil War happened in 1949. So a lot of the people, mainlander, they actually retreated to Taiwan along with the national government because of the Civil War. And they also brought in a lot of different regions of culture, to this small island, including the food culture. So that's the reason why you could almost find every region of food, in this small island. So this is something definitely, is a highlight in Taiwan. The next slide, please. Yeah, more food. So probably you heard about bubble tea. It's actually from Taiwan. So I know that they have a lot of chain store of Gongfu tea, Gongfu cha. There's if you go to a different places, there are different kind of the street food. It's just simply delicious just by looking at the picture. But anyway, next slide. You will never get bored in Taipei, although Taipei is a very small city, but they offer a lot. Other than the city life that you like, if you like go shopping, go to a bookstore. By the way, I have to mention, there's a very famous bookstore. It's open 24 hours in Taipei City. It's quite a scene. It's basically there's a very good place to go if you enjoy city life. But other than city life, they also offer for example, Yangmingshan Mountain National Park. As a matter of fact, this is also very close to Soochow University, our host institution. And you could enjoy the sunset, and then there's and of course there's a lot of temples in Taipei and also outside of Taipei, and Professor Rudo will talk about that later. All right, next slide, please. Oh, in terms of transportation, some students might ask, how do I get along, get by Taiwan? So, particularly in Taipei, I think its transportation is really convenient. So including, the subway system, the bus system, and then also they have higher ways, high speed rail, and then also taxis are almost everywhere. It's very, very easy to get the taxi as well. So it would be very easy for you to, to travel around, and it is very clean, very safe, and it's very cheap as well. Right, Next slide. So, the next slide is, about the preparation. What we need to do, since, we are talking about E-Turn 2021 as we target to recruit 12 students to do a feasibility study in Taiwan, because it is a small cohorts. So ID 2050 is not required for the E-Turn, 21 cohorts. However, we are going to hold a PQP in the previous turn, which is in D-Turn, to help you to prepare your project proposal. Still, we are expecting students to drive a whole proposal, which including, the background and the literature review, and also the research methodology. And once they get into Taiwan, so they could run and collecting data and make sure they complete, the project to our standards. And also, of course, we're going to help to set up a site orientation prior to departure to make sure that everybody have a good transition, to know what exactly going to happen, to answer as many questions as you may have. All right, next slide, please. All right, next slide. Oh, okay.
Okay, so thank you very much, Wenhua. So I'm Jennifer Rudolph, and like Professor Du said, she and I co-direct the HUA and IQP centers in Taiwan together. Both of them are brand new, and a lot of them have the same information, like the same housing in Taipei and that sort of thing, except the Taiwan HUA center is going to be oriented slightly differently. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Our first iteration of the Taiwan Project Center will be in that should be 2021, not 2020, since 2020 is over. It'll be May 11th to June 15th, 2021. And that is a 5-week period where people in the HUA Center would be in Taiwan. They spend 4 weeks in Taipei. And as Professor Du said, that's in northern Taiwan, in the current capital. And then 1 week in Tainan, which is in South Taiwan. And it's the old capital of Taiwan. And in Taipei, you have all sorts of sites to see that Professor Du went over many of them. The same thing in Tainan, except Tainan is more of a cultural center. And so lots of temples and night markets there. So that's why we split up the HUA Center so that you're in both cities. So you can see both sides of the culture, the modern and the much more traditional. In both places, we'll have lots of excursions to the National Palace Museum, to night markets, to various places that I have pictures of later. And also, just so you see my background, it looks like I'm in Taipei right now. I'm sitting on a balcony of the Grand Hotel, which is not far from your university housing that you would be at. And it is a beautiful building that looks over the city. You can see the city in the background. And so this HUA Center is going to be organized around a couple themes that encapsulate what I think Taiwan is about. And I lived in Taiwan for 2 years in the 1980s, 2 years in the 1990s, and I've gone back periodically since then, most recently in spring of 2019 with Professor Du. And some of the things that have always struck me about Taiwan and living there is that it has this vibrant city life as well as a vibrant rural life that has as a focal point food and gods. And so that's going to be a big theme of the HUA Center. The other theme is about Taiwanese identity. And Professor Du mentioned a bit about the Civil War in 1949, that ended in 1949, that resulted in Taiwan being the Republic of China and mainland China being the People's Republic of China. And that makes for a very complicated, interesting political theme. So that's the other theme of the HUA Center. Now, for an HUA Center, and I know that most of you who have come to this session today are interested in the IQP, but for the HUA Center, it's structured a little bit differently. You do 3 courses equivalent while you're in Taiwan, and those 3 courses serve as the final 3 credits of your HUA requirement or for your Chinese Studies minor. And we organize it around the 3 classes. One is topics in Chinese history, and what we'll be doing at the HUA Center is focusing on Taiwan's democratization and political and cultural identity. The second class is pop culture and social change, and here we'll focus on food and temple culture. And then the third course is an independent project of your choice. It's basically your inquiry seminar or your capstone for your minor. And that is going to be based on your on-site experience. And we'll spend, like I said, 4 weeks in Taipei, 1 week in Tainan with multiple excursions. And then when you come back to the States, you'll have another 2 weeks to finish writing up your independent project. No Chinese language is necessary. As Professor Du said, it's helpful, but certainly not necessary. So the first class we're going to look at food and gods. And one of the most striking aspects of life in Taipei or Tainan or anywhere in Taiwan is the colorful, vibrant temple scene. And it is, it just blows first-time visitors away, because these are not relics of the past. These are living religious sites where people go and they worship, and they're very eclectic and inclusive in their worship in Taiwan. You'll have people go to Confucian temples, and they'll go to Buddhist temples, and they'll go to Taoist temples, and some temples have all of it mixed together. You go to a Catholic church in Taipei, you will think, wow, I have never seen the Virgin Mary look like that, because they treat her like a living God, as they would in the temple. And it's a very eclectic, vibrant scene, and I have always been fascinated by it. Like I said, I started going to Taiwan in 1985, and this never has ceased to draw me in. Another really vibrant part of the Taiwan scene is night markets and food culture. And these are related again to temples, because many of the night markets originated as community scenes that developed outside of temples, because the temples were such a central part of life. And this is just a few scenes. I took all these pictures. So these are real scenes at night markets where they have lots of food. My favorite fruit is featured in the fruit stand scene there. And the night market that I took these pictures at is, well, most of the pictures, is the night market that's closest to your lodging. It's the Sherlin night market. And then another one is the Rauha night market down in more central Taipei. But it's a really fun scene, as Professor Du said, very cheap. One of my favorite dishes is shaved ice, which is down on the left. If you're wondering what is that weird looking thing, the white and the brown, well, that's shaved ice, and it's delicious in the hot, humid weather because of the ice. They put on condensed milk, that's red beans on top. You can get mango or whatever type of fruit you want. So it's lovely. And the temples, again, are just amazing. The temple you see the outside of in this slide is in Taipei itself. It's one of the oldest temples in Taiwan and goes back to the 1700s. I'm going to show you a short video just so you get an idea of what some of this temple life is like. Can you see that? Okay, so I just want to give you a quick view. That was a weird looking scene. You probably wouldn't think of a temple as having people outside with firecrackers and with this wooden pelican or carriage, where they actually have a god in that carriage. They take the gods and they move them about. When they move them about, it's a very lively scene that's part celebration and part religious ritual, and it is quite lively. I have lots of little embedded videos in this, but we want to get to questions, so I'm not going to really show you any more, but these are all temple scenes or outside of temples. You have a Buddhist temple up in the upper right, You have temples. It's also a more Buddhist temple on the left, but you also have Taoist elements in here and Confucian elements in these celebrations. And these are living gods. And people can become gods in Taiwan. In fact, my research is about a person who became a god in Taiwan, who's quite present, especially in Tainan. So that's what we'll focus on, is this cultural aspect that involves both food and gods. Now, the second class would be on Taiwan's contested identity. Mainland China considers Taiwan a renegade province. However, Taiwan operates as a country, but it's not recognized as a country in the international scene. And so it has this very strange, fraught past and present, made even more complicated by the fact that Taiwan is a robust democracy and mainland China is not. So Taiwan has long been an ally of the U.S. In fact, if the U.S. hadn't interfered in the aftermath of the Civil War, I think it's safe to say that Taiwan would have been reabsorbed into mainland China. So it's partially a U.S. Protected entity that the U.S. doesn't actually recognize as a country, but we are sworn to protect if China were to invade. So it makes it for a really interesting place to study China and to figure out what is the U.S. relationship to mainland China and to Taiwan. So that's what the second class would be about. And that has to do with this slide. You know, Taiwan, as you see here, and as Professor Du mentioned before, is very close to China, but it has its own flag. It operates independently of China, but China claims it. So you see the Taiwan flag on the insert on the globe map, but you see Taiwan is also the same color as China. So geopolitically, it's very interesting. So that's what we would look at. There's an independence movement in Taiwan. So some people in Taiwan would like Taiwan to be independent. The U.S. does not want it to be independent because that puts it in jeopardy of an active conflict with China. And the U.S. has been one of the main players actually in the stalemated Civil War, making sure that Taiwan operates as an independent place, which is one reason why you see U.S. flags occasionally in Taiwan, like you do in this alleyway. I just took that last year. But it is a very interesting place. I'm a political historian, so I really enjoy this aspect of it. The last part of the class would be a topic of your choice, whether you want to look at Taiwan's very amazing handling of being in an active earthquake zone. Their architecture and their buildings have world-class precautions against earthquakes, including the tallest building is 101 stories, called Taipei 101. And the image you see on the upper right is a huge contraption right smack in the middle of the building that allows it to sway with tremors. So that could be something you want to study in Taiwan, perhaps something more engineering, or you might be really fascinated by the types of creatures and images that top Taipei's and Taiwan's temples, which you see on the upper left, or the temple scenes, or you could do a food guide of some sort, analysis of the food. The Michelin Guide, which is usually top-notch restaurants in Europe, has discovered the food markets in Asia and in Taiwan in particular. So they actually rate some of the night market scenes. So that could be a source of your topic for your independent project. All of these things are possible. What I know for sure is if you go to Taiwan, whether for the IQP or for the HUA, you're going to be amazed by the different types of things you see and different types of environments you experience. It has pretty much everything. You have luminescent algae off of the islands of Taiwan. That's Matsu Islands on the upper left. You have an area in New Taipei City that you have international tourists flocking to because it looks like the Ghibli studio Spirited Away scene. You have Taroko Gorge, which is an incredible natural feature on eastern Taiwan's coast that has a highway that just sort of clings the cliff's edge, and it's quite beautiful. You have really fun, vibrant downtown shopping districts in Taipei, and you have fishing villages that are quite quaint and beautiful. And then, you also have these odd types of places that pop up in Taiwan. The lower right-hand corner, you see a scene from Taichung, which is a city sort of in the middle of Taiwan, really. And that is a village that was built for veterans of World War II who fled from the mainland and settled there in housing. And then over the past number of years, the veterans have decorated it in a quite lively way that is reminiscent of the Aboriginal peoples of Taiwan, because Taiwan is primarily Chinese in its cultural foundation, but it also has a number of Aboriginal tribes that are more Polynesian than they are Chinese. So it's this place with a really layered identity in so many ways. In Tainan, these are some of the views after we'll spend a week there. You can see it's in the south of the city, or south of the island, and it is accessible by high-speed rail, very convenient, very inexpensive. It is a city of temples and strange museums. This is a museum that was started by a petrochemical company, the one you see in the middle top, and then you see temples in the other types of pictures. And my pirate that I study, who has become a god, is in the lower right-hand corner. So any questions you have, we're happy to answer. And we would like to open this up to your comments. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. So if you have a question, just put your video on and ask. And we're both professors, so if you have no questions, we can ask some of you. Professor Du is from Taiwan, so she has a lot of knowledge, not just about the stuff we presented, but other areas of Taiwan if you want to ask. Kristen, do you have a question?
Hey, I had a question about the application. So from what I understand, you guys don't really choose like who ends up in like your group, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to like the meeting on Asia, was it yesterday or something like that? You said you had like a list of criteria for Hangzhou. Is the criteria for Taipei the same?
Well, so there can be two different application processes first. There's one for HUA and one for IQP. And the HUA one, I would select the people. The IQP one, because of the scale of IQP, that we wouldn't have that. So Professor Du, did you want to talk about criteria?
Yes, I think, they are not called IGSE anymore, right? So it's GEO office. We ask all the director to submit their criteria of selecting students. So, you are right. In a sense, we cannot really choose our own student, but in another sense, we could actually, share with you what exactly the criteria we'll be looking for. So you will get a higher chance to be placed in our center. So is there anything you want to say, Jennifer?
Yeah, and also, since it's an e-term, there aren't nearly as many centers in e-term. So if you're wanting to go to an e-term center, and then you have a choice of, I think, Taiwan, Beijing, and maybe 2 or 3 other centers. So if you are listing, because you have to put at least 6 centers that you'd be willing to go to for the IQP. But if you do it so that Taipei or Taiwan is one of your top choices, and you want e-term, you sort of slide into the pot that's going to be considered for Taiwan pretty much automatically, I'd say.
But for D term?
D term's a different story, but that's where the criteria come into play. And so I know, because we direct the Hangzhou Center as well, which is a B term center. And so for that center, we have established criteria where we put an emphasis on language learners, not native speakers, but language learners, people who have taken classes on Asia, because we figure if you have tried to mine your interest, you should be going over there. So we try to respect that. We also put some emphasis on grades, but not nearly as heavy as some of the other centers, because for us, the biggest criteria is interest. We want people who are curious and who want to explore this culture. That's what we want. So you can come talk to us in a office hours, and we can share with you more of what we're looking for, but it is strange because we don't get to handpick the people anymore.
We got Hannah, raise her hand. Hannah?
Yeah, sorry, my camera isn't working. So for the IQP and E-term, which E-term is it in?
E21, which is next summer.
Would it be in the beginning of the summer or the end of the summer though? Because I think they have two different E-terms in the summer.
Yeah, there are two different E-terms. So it's
Right.
E2, I believe.
Right.
Is that
Like in between, the IQP for E21 is from June 21st to July 30th. It runs a little bit different from, kind of in between E1
Okay.
and
Yeah, so then the ID 2050 would have to be done in D-term of this year, right?
it's academic.
Okay.
But it would be an informal ID 2050.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. And then for D-term next year, it would be in C-term.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay, cool, thanks.
And Madeline and Susanna, you came in a little late. I'm just curious, are you more interested in IQP or HUA? Either one is fine.
I'm more interested in IQP.
Okay. What about you, Susanna? You do IQP as well. All right. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, you're in the global fair, and that's primarily IQP. So do you have any thoughts on what you're seeing? Because this is our first time at this, so there is time to incorporate feedback into how we structure it.
Not really.
Okay. How many of you have studied Chinese? Just curious. Okay, Susanna has. Hannah, you have, right? And okay, Christian has.
I mean, I took your pop culture class and I've like dabbled in watching Chinese media enough to pick up some words, but other than that, I haven't actually formally studied it. I would like to though.
Excellent. And I didn't, I guess, Chinese language or China. So
Okay.
You were in the class. You count. Okay, and the others of you have not studied China in any way, so that's fine.
We have a couple of students, from my class.
Oh, you do have a couple students in your classroom? Okay.
Yeah, they are. So that would be very nice if, they could, doing the IQP or HUA, really using the language in Taiwan. That would be awesome.
Yeah. And we structured it for this coming year in case anyone wanted to do both HUA and IQP. You could do them back to back so that you could have a longer stay in Taiwan. And so if anyone is interested in a Chinese studies minor, you could be done. You could just do it.
I have a question for the IQP stuff. So like for the projects that you guys are doing, do you have any idea what you're like hoping to do, like what kind of fields of of like projects, I guess. Like some people do like a lot of like urban development or like green work, stuff like that. Like what do you guys think that you would be doing?
Yeah, so initially we're going to have, depends on how many students we have. We have a couple goals for this first iteration. One is to have students do a feasibility study for how to implement the IQP Center as a full-fledged IQP Center. And part of that will be identifying sponsors. We have ideas for some of the sponsors, and as Professor Du said, we're working with the Taiwan Economic Cultural Office in Boston, and they have put us in touch with some people. We have contacts at universities, and we have you know, a contact with this young woman who started a really interesting NGO in Taipei that is basically trying to infuse innovation and creativity into the educational system in Taiwan, because Taiwan, like many places in Asia, is a very exam-based education system. So that, I think that's probably one potential area is education. Ecotourism, Taiwan is now an ecotourism center, and it's been very good in terms of cleaning itself up from pollution. When I first went to Taiwan in the mid-'80s, super polluted. But now it is pretty darn clean, and they've done a great job in cleaning it up. What are the other themes that you think we might look at, Wenhua?
So I also talked to one of the professor from Soochow University, and I think he mentioned about some interesting project that is the Soochow University is actually working on. So the Ministry of Education in Taiwan, they have been trying to advocating to launch in those kind of the university lead social responsibility project. In other words, like for example, they will be focusing on, for example, Soochow University is located in Shilin district, and what Shilin provide a very like historical specific site, as you know, Chiang Kai-shek, the previous you know, the KMT leader, actually reside in Shilin, so brought in some of the historical interesting, you know, there. And previously it was forbidden, you know, to take a look at the document because it's considered as the top secret. And now is that the secret is revealed, and now the university is trying to get some sort of the historical perspective on that, and then getting to, you know, to make it a tourist site as well. So they are trying to, you know, creating some kind of the project to be able to advocate the area of the tourist interest. So, you know, those are one of the things that we've been talking about. But the interesting things about, you know, the first cohort of Taiwan to go into Taiwan is there are a lot of possibility as we are trying to help students to, you know, to kind of narrow down by reaching out to a lot of the, you know, the sponsors, what we're actually doing now. So I assume, you know, by the time, I would say maybe by next spring, we'll be able to get some, you know, a very solid direction of where to go, where it's going.
Yeah, and it's very common for centers not to really know what the projects are until just a month or two beforehand, before your IB 2050 section, because things change. So in Hangzhou, we always, we identify our projects about 3 months before the students actually go. And that's typical.
Mm-hmm. And also, I would like to mention that in other project centers like Japan and Iceland as well, they have done, you know, the similar feasibility study before as well, before they officially launch their centers there.
And it's great because, you know, that's what WPI is all about, right? Theory and practice. So we come up in theory with, we think this would be a great center, and you guys figure out how to make it work. Now, in this case, we've done some of the groundwork for you and identifying the university partner and identifying the housing. And we expect that will stay constant once the center is full-fledged. But you guys would be able to shape how this center should play out. You know, what should be the language component? Because, you know, like Costa Rica, students take a couple hours of Spanish for the first 2 weeks every morning. You know, and Bangkok, they take language as part of the pre-ID 2050 preparation. you guys will be able to figure out all those different moving pieces. And who are the good sponsors? What would be the good themes in Taipei? Would you want to be looking at historical preservation with all the temples, right? So that you want your IQP topics to be at that intersection of society and technology, because that's where you guys are going to end up operating. And that's how you really learn, is by having to pull together different perspectives and different modes of thinking to tackle a real life project. So, you know, identifying sponsors is actually a really fun type of responsibility, whether the center directors do it or whether you guys would do it as part of a feasibility study, because you have to really think, what are the important things in this society? Or what are the important issues for this organization? Whether it's an NGO, a non-governmental organization, or a government ministry, or a university, or a startup, or a corporation, an environmental group, an urban planning group. You know, the possibilities are quite broad. And you have to remember that even though it's an initial group, you will have advisors. Professor Du will be there, right?
Yes, I am.
And if we have takers for the HUA, I'll be there for the HUA and maybe for part of the IQP. And so, you know, you're not going to be on the ground by yourself. You have a very good infrastructure at Suzhou University. You have WPI's infrastructure holding you up as well. You have Professor Du, who's from Taiwan and speaks Chinese, like a native, so she is native Taiwanese, or native of Taiwan, not native Taiwanese, part of the political fraughtness of Taiwan. You know, so you have all that support. And like I said, I lived in Taiwan for 2 years in the 80s, went back for 2 years in the 90s, and go back every chance I get, because it is a fascinating place, really fascinating.
So you said that you're sponsored by Dongwu University. Does that mean like we'll be working with students there too, potentially, or?
Potentially, yes, but not for the E21 group. The E21 group will be paired with a cultural partner, but it's very interesting question, because we've been talking about the possibility of pairing up with the buddy to work with the project, but that will be down the road. And as a matter of fact, that will be a very interesting topic to put it into for research into the feasibility study as well. But you will be, paired up with a buddy, no matter you're going in E-turn and beyond. You have to turn on your microphone.
Thank you. Let me attest to how hospitable people in Taiwan are. It is, I think, the friendliest place I've ever lived. And I've lived in a lot of places at this point. I mean, the culture is very open. Everyone invites you to eat all of the time. They don't like just 3 meals a day in Taiwan. They're like, I don't know, 6 meals? It's everything revolves around food.
We want to.
Yeah, and it is very inexpensive. It's delicious, and it's really super friendly.
They are, I think, Professor Rudo, maybe, you as a foreigner, the foreign face in Taiwan, you must have a very different, kind of the perception, how people coming to approach you, how friendly they are, right?
Yeah, when I first went to Taiwan, I was 21. I just graduated from college. And although I'd studied 2 years of Chinese at college, I landed and I couldn't understand a word of what anyone was saying. First of all, I didn't realize that some people spoke Taiwanese and not Mandarin. But even those people that were speaking Mandarin, I just wasn't accustomed to it yet. I had to learn the pace of the language and the vocabulary. It was just such a friendly experience, because people were always approaching me, wanting to practice their English. People I met in parks were like, would you like to go social dancing? And I was a little taken aback, because I just moved there from the south side of Chicago, where if you met someone in a park, you would never say, "Oh, sure, let me go to the mountains with you." And you can't do that just willy-nilly in Taiwan either. But it is, by and large, very safe, and people are so warm. They really want to help you and to get to know you, and they love sharing their culture. It's an incredible place.
Yeah, I remember, many years ago when I was still in Taiwan, and then actually my dad was driving. We got lost, and then we were asking somebody to give us a direction. And it's interesting that we don't know much of, my family doesn't know, a lot of Taiwanese, but, the people we were interacting, they speak Taiwanese. So we are trying to communicate. I think the person was trying very hard to explain where we should go. We still didn't get it. So eventually the guy actually hopped on his motorcycle and then just follow me. And then, leave us, driving for about, I would say 5 minutes of the road. And then, finally just pointing it there. So that is, the highway. So we were just, as a Taiwanese myself, I still very touched by, how friendly people and how they are willing to, to help you out. So I would just, this is one of the examples that, Taiwanese, they are very famous for their friendliness.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry if I'm asking too many questions.
No, this is
Not possible.
Okay. I have two this time. So are there going to be, like, for the IQP, are there any scheduled trips at all, or?
We will have a scheduled trip, and then we do have the plan, and then there's a lot of the tourist sites either in Taipei City or outside of Taipei City, and then we'll be working with our the partner Soochow University to help us to arrange as well.
So are there like any plans to go down south?
Yes, we will, right, Jennifer, right, Professor?
Yeah, and what you also have to remember is Taiwan is really small.
Yeah.
Professor Du said it's 1.3 the size of Massachusetts. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I put it in other terms. It's a third of the size of Pennsylvania. So it's that small, and yet it has a high-speed rail system. And so you can travel on weekends to the southern part of Taiwan really easily. So when you're in an IQP, you are WPIs for the week, right? You're working full-time on that project during the day, but not necessarily in the evening. But on the weekends, you should be traveling, no matter whether you're in Taiwan or you're in Venice, whatever project center you end up going to. You want to explore and get to know the place.
Mm-hmm. So just to give you a sense, like for example, that from Taipei to Tainan, the two cities in between, if you get on a high speed rail, it take about like 2 hours. Is that right, Jennifer? Last time we took out 2 hours from Taipei to Tainan. So easily you could travel very easily around the island.
Yeah.
This sounds really silly, but is there a curfew?
Sorry?
No.
Is there a curfew for IQPs or no?
Well, actually, I say no, but we don't know about the dorm because it's university housing.
The dorm, yeah, it's a good question. I'll follow up.
That's okay. It was just kind of random.
Well, what we have done before, like in Hangzhou, because we stay on a campus there too, in a hotel. And this is a IGSD or a GEO requirement. If students are leaving the housing for overnight trips, they have to register that with the advisors, like where they're going, when they're coming back, how they're getting there, where they're staying. That's an IGSD requirement, no matter what project site you're at. So you are allowed to leave, but WPI is kind of responsible for you when you're over there, so we have to know where you are.
Could you elaborate a little more on how this site can be used to complete both like the end of a Chinese minor and that type of HUA requirement and also the IQP?
Sure. So, the HUA requirement is 6 classes, right? And so typically you take those 6 classes, you have breadth and depth. And so you might take 3 classes in history as your depth, and then 1 class in music as your breadth. And then you could take another class in international studies or history again as your 5th class. And then you take the inquiry seminar. when you go off to an HUA center, any HUA center, that breadth and depth requirement goes away. And you can go to the HUA center and finish the last 3 courses of your HUA requirement. All right. And if you do that, so then you're done with your HUA requirement. If you want to do a minor on top of that, minors are only an additional 3 classes on top of your depth usually. So if you're doing like Chinese language as your HUA requirement, or you're doing like a Chinese studies type of thing for HUA, or history, whatever, and then you decide you want to do a minor in that, you only have to take 3 more classes, and because you can double count 3 of your HUA requirement classes, as long as you're related. So if you have completed your HUA requirement in something related to China, let's say, or in history, or something like that, and then you want to do a minor, then we could, as long as it's thematically related, we can use those 3 classes that you take through the HUA center for your minor. There's 3 additional classes. And instead of having that last class be your inquiry seminar, the last class would be your minor capstone.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, we're here all the time, me hanging out on this beautiful balcony and Wenhua hanging out at WPI.
Not my message.
So we're happy to answer any questions that come up later. We appreciate you coming today. So thank you.
Thank you.